Okay, after that bit of silliness. I want to spend most of our time today talking about machines with faces, but we should finish up the other article first. So let's get a reminder. We're talking about horizontal surveillance, mobile communication, and social networking sites. This is the Hermida article for this week. So we left off talking about, and what did we talk about so far? What we were discussing about for this article. What was the idea about social media and surveillance? Or technology and surveillance? Because remember this is like the last 10 minutes of class.
You talk about something about, like, talking about something and then you see an ad for it on your phone.
Yeah. Did you want to?
I was going to say.
Yeah, it's just the idea that, like, if you remember where we started, it was sort of this idea of, like, how aware are you that you're being spied on when you're on technology? And the answer is pretty aware, right? So that first form of surveillance that we were talking about, our author would refer to this as vertical surveillance, right? Which is going to be the opposite of something else he's going to call horizontal surveillance. Ultimately, our author wants to say that technology increases both, right? And that, in fact, we respond to both the same way. So, just to kind of, so there's the fact that we feel, at least like anecdotally, at least we wouldn't be surprised if people are miking us and tracking our conversations so that they can tell us what to buy. Doesn't surprise us. Does this make anyone actually want to get rid of their cell phone? My ancient cell phone. This is a 4, man. It's like 4 models ago. Does it make anyone want to just like check their cell phone, go off the grid?
I had a flip phone until January this year, and sometimes I do want to get back just because it's so much to deal with.
I didn't have, this is actually my first cell phone.
Whoa.
So, I got this in 2014. So, I was a late bloomer. I had friends who would be like, seriously, I can get you a cell phone, you're gonna die. Like, so you're gonna like fall over and get in an accident and not have to be able to call anybody. People were really worried about this, and that's why I finally broke down and got one. But anyways, getting back to the point, does this make people do people think that as a result of having this knowledge that they're gonna get rid of their technology? Anyone in this room? No, right? Of course not. There's an interesting, that makes us in a really interesting historical moment, right? Like, this is the only time, maybe the only time in history that we are all very aware that people are spying on us constantly. And what is our reaction to it? Oh well, right? We don't really care. Like, I don't really care. Do you guys really care? Is this worrying you or stressing you out or? No, and that's what's interesting about the relationship of surveillance and technology. It's removed. Like, would you feel the same way if somebody was like, I don't know, sitting and watching you across the street in the bushes to figure out what products to try to sell you? I don't know, like stalker marketers. Would that bother you? Yeah, so there's something really interesting that technology has created kind of this distance where surveillance is becoming more common, but also, like, in a lot of ways less frightening and simply like less intrusive. Okay, so that's vertical. Why do you think our author calls that vertical surveillance? Why would it be vertical?
Because as technology increases, the amount of surveillance is increasing.
Well, both of them are going to be driven by technology.
Because it's someone like looking down on us, like
Yeah.
spying on us from their position.
Yeah, so it's because there's these sort of larger entities, right, that look down on us, right, that are observing us. There's another form of surveillance that happens, and this is particularly true in social media as a technology. Who watches us and controls us on social media? Other than, like, I'm not talking about corporations, not talking about business, I'm not talking in this case about like Russian interference or anything like that anymore.
Others, people around us, people that we follow and follow us.
Yeah, we're watched by our family and friends on social media. We're surveyed, right? We're in some ways we offer up for people more scrutiny than we did before. So technology also increases this horizontal. Does anybody here, this is just, you don't have to share if you don't want to. Does anybody here, does their parents track you on your phone? Some of you guys? I had one student who told me one time, this was last year, that her parents will actually watch to see where she goes on campus, and if she goes someplace where she normally doesn't, she'll call them to make sure that they're not with a boy.
I know a lot of, like, I was homeschooled, so I knew a lot of parents who were like that. And, like, they were like, what are you doing at Taco Bell, Becca? Like, she's 19 years old and in college. And they're like, what are you doing at Taco Bell at 12:30 at night?
Exactly, yeah. As if Taco Bell was the place where you were going to do something like nefarious, like the evil Taco Bell, right? That's where it's all sex, drugs, and rock and roll, the Taco Bell. Yeah, so the idea is basically like, and so we think back to like when we were talking about that sort of carceral society stuff, a lot of it's interpersonal. Right? So we're, in a lot of ways, internet technology has allowed us to be surveyed by our friends and family in a far more increasing way. Both of which result in basically having more controlled behavior. But what our author's really interested in is that our attitude is so nonchalant about both. And actually, when it comes to the horizontal form of surveillance, we're usually not only like allowing it, we're encouraging it. If we think about too, like how else is social media controlling us, we can think about like, maybe here still on Facebook, didn't migrate off. I was a part of that great millennial migration off Facebook, but this was like six years ago, like everyone, like a bunch of millennials left social media, like rock bands and stuff left it, and it was a big deal. Anyways, I don't miss it. But anyways, like what happens when you're on, what happens when people post their opinions and attitudes about things on Facebook? What almost always inevitably happens. Or even their personal stories.
Either they get likes or people commenting about how they like it or dislike it.
Yeah, essentially like you're going to offer it up for all sorts of like, there's not very many civil Facebook conversations, are there?
Twitter, that's the
Wait, I want to.
I said middle-aged moms are the nicest people ever. Like my mom will post pictures of something of me on Facebook, and then all of her friends are so nice.
So that's a system, but I feel like that's like not always like, I mean, it's really nice when there's people like that, but.
I think most of the time it turns into an argument, especially if it's political.
Yeah. If you were to post, so like imagine like you were at your, I don't know, Thanksgiving dinner and you were to make a random political comment in front of your family. How likely would it be that, I don't know, your Aunt Sue or whatever is going to jump down your throat really aggressively at the dinner table? Maybe some of your families this is common, but how common is that in your interpersonal relationships? Now there's a sort of air of civility, right? Is that true when you're talking about your online friends? Is your aunt, if you post and your Aunt Sue doesn't like your politics, what might she very much so do on Facebook that she wouldn't do in person? She might jump down your throat about it, right? That's really common, right? And so essentially that's kind of the idea. So we have this horizontal form of surveillance as well. Yeah.
Okay, this is really kind of off topic, but it relates to like the
political stuff. Have you seen what's been going on at KU with one of the sororities that put one of their people on probation because of her political views? Like
No.
they didn't match up with theirs, so they put her on probation for all of it, for that. Like she got kicked out for a while and everything.
No, I didn't hear about this.
Yeah, it's been on Fox News and everything.
Huh. No, I haven't seen it. Has anybody else seen about that?
I only know about this because the girls from my hometown that got this, so everybody from my hometown is posting it all over the place.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I'll have to look at it and see what it is. So. No, I wish I had more to say about it, but and tie it into surveillance, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, it's really weird. Because the people were oh yeah, we don't they made her take it down, and they were making her because she had all these political things. So apparently with the campus or their whatever stuff was popping up, and they didn't like that, so they had to make her monitor her social media and all of that stuff.
Yeah. I know that when I was in when I was in grad school, there was somebody who would get on social media and harass her students about their politics, and she got fired for it. Which I felt was totally fair. That's the most First of all, who's friends with that many other students? Well, she used to actually make them add her as friends so that she could do stuff for the class, but then she would actually comment on their posts, which is no offense, if anybody ever tried, well, I don't exist on Facebook, so I guess it's not really a problem. I was gonna say if anyone tries to add me, I probably won't, because it seems strange to me, but anyways, never mind. Any other questions on Ramita? Back when I was on Facebook, that happens, and I always feel should I, shouldn't I? This is really strange, right? Any questions on this article before we move forward? I want to get to the other one. Okay. So let's talk about Machines with Faces by Black. Any initial reactions to this article? I thought this was a pretty interesting article. Yeah.
I really liked how he started off by saying it's probably not likely any of our lifetimes that the robots are gonna have their own free will and take over, so maybe we should be more scared of something else happening that's probably going to happen sooner. I thought that was just a really neat kind of take that he had.
Yeah, I do like that about this article as well, that thing about AI, right? So do you guys know much about artificial intelligence, or know what it is? Is artificial intelligence a science fiction fantasy anymore? No, not really. I have a cousin who works in an AI firm. It's something that, basically, but it's not so we used to, when we think about, I don't know, 1980s Blade Runner kind of world, when we thought about artificial intelligence, what did we assume about thinking robots? That they would be what?
Evil.
They would be evil, yeah. What would they be like? Yeah, we thought that they would be like humans. Is AI as we experience it now anything like human consciousness? No. Artificial intelligence, it doesn't look like humanity. What makes something artificial intelligent? What makes something intelligent, at least in the sense used for artificial intelligence? Does anybody know what computers can do that's different than what they could do in the past? So they can learn. You guys didn't know the thing where it says, where they make you say that you're not a robot? When you search or when you sign into something? Does anybody know what that's actually for? This is a weird thing. So CAPTCHA, right? And you may have seen that pop up it's an artificial intelligence company. It's one of the larger ones. But what you're actually doing, so the websites that you're signing on to have outsourced basically this service where you're training artificial intelligence via your selection of photos. So when you're like, you think about, what I'm talking about, the photos, so what pops up? Like, what happens when you sign in the photos, the CapGal thing? What do they ask you to do with the photos?
They say something like, pick all the pictures that have like a fire hydrant in them or something, and you click them.
Yeah. What are the pictures like?
Horrible quality.
Yeah, they're usually pretty poor, like photo quality. What else?
We usually got a lot going on. They're kind of busy.
Pretty busy, yeah, totally. Do you usually get the whole object in them, in all of the photos? Some of them you do, some of them you don't, right? So it could be like, point out the fire hydrant, and there's just like a corner of a fire hydrant in one of them, and it's not the right shape. Basically what it's doing is it's taking like that pattern recognition software that they've coded, right? And so they're finding ways in which like we can automatically find patterns, right, as human beings visually that robots can't. And then essentially what you're doing is you're teaching the robots how to identify those patterns. So the algorithm will change to essentially incorporate your decision making within that. Does that make sense? So you're essentially training computers to learn. So it's not a big outlandish thing, but what our author wants to be is like, it's pretty unbelievable. Like what's still not very believable here is that it's in any way going to mirror human consciousness. We don't know why human beings are conscious. Even the greatest neuroscience in the world doesn't know why human beings have consciousness, why we're self-aware, why we think the way that we do, right? That these things are to some degree like too complex for us to have unraveled, and it's very unlikely that within any of our lifetimes, like you're pointing out, we would actually be able to formulate robots capable of doing that, even if they can learn, right? So we have artificial intelligence, but it's not the kind of artificial intelligence that people used to dream of or worry about. But our author is worried about something else. What is our author worried about? I'll give you a clue, it's in the title.
Horizontal surveillance.
What's that?
Horizontal surveillance.
No, we switched articles,
Oh.
sorry. We're on machines with faces. What are they? Yeah, go ahead.
The problem of cruelty.
What's that?
The problem of cruelty.
Yeah, so he's worried about basically human cruelty, right? And how this relates to robots. So how do we get to, we were talking about artificial intelligence and now we're talking about cruelty. What's the leap? What's possible? What is he worried about when it comes to the robots or when it comes to machines?
Well, he's talking about like how they have, like our faces are the final picture that like shows emotions and like cruelty, I guess. They were saying that like robots will never have like the ability to have like complex faces or anything again.
So there's something significant, about the human face and the way it communicates emotions. So there's a huge literature on the face. I know it sounds really funny to say, right? There's a huge literature on the human face. The human face is it's different than other animals' faces. How is it different? How's a human face different?
It's a lot more expressive.
Yeah, we have a ton of muscles in our face, right? And so like other animals, when they use their muscles on their face, how much control do they have over it? Not really any, right? Like a dog might wince if you hit it. I'm not saying like we should hit dogs, right? But like if a dog gets hurt, it winces, right? But it can't wince to communicate that it's hurt. A human being can. And human beings communicate with the massive amount of muscles in our faces. There's also something else that's really unique about the human face amongst animals. How much of our face is visible when we're facing forward?
All of it.
Yeah, all of it. Our face is structured flat. It's like an interface, right? So like you stand and look at me, you get my full facial expression. right? You think about other animals, right? They have like long snouts and parts of their faces are obscured from any angle, right? That's very different from a human face. So this recognition of emotion in other people's faces, it's sort of written into the way in which we understand patterns as human beings, right? The way in which we recognize things. This is you guys catch the thing about partial faces? I'll erase the previous article. You guys catch the thing about partial faces in here? So we're made to respond to human faces. Does it have to be a complete human face for us to understand, to see emotion in it? This is the whole discussion about dogs. Do you remember the discussion about dogs in here? You want a page number? Let's get you a page number. Partial faces. So this discussion starts on page 8. Oh wait, hold on. No, this part's on page 10. It introduces partial faces a little earlier. So what happens if anybody here have dogs or ever had a dog? Do you find yourself regularly talking about the dog's emotions? I do. Like, I don't think that's weird. Like, you're like, oh, he's so happy, right? Like you get the dog. We always everyone, human beings always associate dogs panting with being happy, right? How is the dog happy when it's panting? No, it's sweating. You know, it's not an expression of happiness. Now, there's a relationship, right? Often when you do things dogs like, they start to sweat, right? They like to run, they like to play, they like to go for walks, they like to, right? And whenever you do any of those things, the dog starts to pant. But what we do is we imply upon it, we write upon that visual stimulus, right? A face, right? This is an example of partial faciality. We can see faces and recognize patterns and things that are very simple and obviously not faces. Did anybody ever watch this really dumb 80s movie where there's a robot protagonist in it called Short Circuit? And the main character is a robot, right? And the robot is really simple. The face of the robot is like a piece of metal and it has like these two like unmoving like eyes that are like lights basically. And then it has these like wonky metal eyebrows and the eyebrows move, right? So like if he's surprised, he looks like this, right? Or whatever, right? The eyebrows move up and down. In the whole movie, like, it emotes. And you as the audience can look at that simple pattern, right? And pull something out of it, right? So it's a weird, like, little trick in human recognition that it does that, right? So we have these partial faces, and then there's this problem in robotics that people will respond to really simple. So like, well, another example, sorry, one more example of partial faciality, emojis. Did anybody ever train you which emotion the emoji is supposed to be representing? Nobody went through and you didn't like look up, you know, the Pearson's Field Guide to Emoji Faces, right, where it told you what each and every one was, right? You just used them, right? And then you expect the other person to know which one they are. Right? It shows how easy it is for us to recognize facial patterns, right? Or even the thing that we do with children when they like happiness, sadness, and they give them faces to learn the names of the emotions. Do you ever see that? Do you do that with children, right? Same sort of thing, basic, easy facial recognition. And so like in robotics, they talk about this uncanny valley. Anybody catch this from the article? The uncanny valley. I'll give you a page number. Well, this is just on the next page. This is on page 11. Yeah.
I think it was basically saying like trying to be too realistic about creating the human face just doesn't work because humans are very, very perceptive. As funny as it sounds, like we make faces out of like things that are not faces. But if something's trying to actually be a human face, we're like, no, that's not it.
Yeah, that's basically, yeah, so that's the first part of our valley, right? So if we were to map this out, right? So this line is human identification. If we identify a human face in it, right? And then if we want to think of this line as how realistic a face is, we have this valley that if it starts looking too realistic but isn't quite right, it makes people disturbed. This is like you think about like all the movies that have mannequins and they're supposed to be creepy, right? Mannequins moving, or I remember that there's this one movie by, I'm trying to think of who it was by. But anyways, there's this big fight scene in it, and this is like in the 50s, right? And it's like they're fighting in a department store and the body parts and the pieces of the mannequins keep on falling on them. And it's really like disturbing. It's supposed to be disturbing, right? But it's really disturbing. The idea is that if something looks a lot like a human face, but isn't one, it seems insincere. People mark it, code it as insincere. They mark it as basically being suspect. Anybody here ever go to a thing where they have, yeah?
I was just going to say, is that why oftentimes humans are afraid of clowns?
Probably, yeah, because you're obscuring enough of the face that it looks a lot like a human face, but it doesn't look completely like one. So yeah, it feels really insincere. The fake smile on the clown in particular makes me think of that, yeah. That'd be a good example. Maybe ever go to a thing with, they have like children's animal electronics. Like I went as an adult to a Chuck E. Cheese party. Like those, the animatronics are really creepy when you're not a child, right? And I think that's exactly kind of what's being pointed out here. Like I've never been afraid or intimidated by a smiley face t-shirt, right? But I am strangely afraid of the animatronics at Chuck E. Cheese. Like it creates a dissonant feeling in me when they move because it's not quite right. It doesn't seem right. So basically the discussion in robotics is how do you find your way by getting more and more realistic to the point where the curve starts to go the other way, that people just start misrecognizing the face as a real human face. And so there are tons of engineers and scientists trying to cross the valley of the uncanny, right? Trying to get past that sort of creep out, shutdown reflex of people. Does our author think we should do this? Why not? What's the danger here? What's the danger of overcoming?
You're like, because if the human face was just like if we lose empathy for the human face because we know it's not, then we're more likely to commit crimes or something like that.
Well, it's more likely that we will be violent is kind of the idea. He's afraid that if we learn, because like, there's a weird trick here. How do I know that you're a conscious being? How do I know that you're like my equal? How do I know that when I look across the room at you, or you look across the room at me, that you are an equal human being to me with just as much thoughts and just as, how do I know this?
Expression on your face?
I mean, if you could get an expression on a robot's face that I would be fooled by, would that be true? Basically, our author is like, I don't. I just trust that it's true. I assume. I give people the grace of assuming that the other person looking at me is human. Right? I have no way of actually knowing this. Right? I have no way of it. This is like has anybody ever heard of Wittgenstein? Wittgenstein was a famous philosopher at the turn of the century, and he likes to talk about, he plays these things called language games, and one of his language games is about pain. And he says, how do you know that what I call pain and what you call pain is the same thing?
We don't, we just kind of assume it's the same thing for you.
Yeah, there's no way of confirming it, right? There's no way of confirming that my internal states and your internal states match. We just give people the grace of considering it the same, right? So there's a weird trick that kind of holds it all together, right? And part of this weird trick is the face, right? When I look into somebody else's face, my brain is hardwired to see somebody else as my equal. There's another philosopher by the name of Emmanuel Levinas, right? Emmanuel Levinas was he was a sort of philosopher, theologian person after World War II. He'd been in concentration camps, and he wrote a lot about the Holocaust. He's very famous if you look him up. Very popular right now. And in fact, he's cited in this article. But anyway, so he talks a lot about like that. He talks about the face, and the metaphor he likes to use is like, you guys know the part of the Old Testament where Moses comes down from the mountain, and they make him wear a veil because his face shines backwards with the light of God. What Levinas says is that basically, like, the face speaks out to us the infinity of those that we look at, right? He says that when we look at a human face, we see the trace of God, a piece of that infinity. So his basic claim is that it's in face-to-face interaction, right? Immediate interaction, where our humanity comes to play the most, right? And it's because, like, we cannot deny other people's humanities when we're interacting with them, right? But all that, according to our author, is kind of just this weird trick of our mind. And if people learn to see it as that, it's going to be a lot easier for people to dismiss other people's humanity. And he gives an example of why this is the case, because that seems on the surface like it shouldn't be the case. And he gives this example of military training. Did anybody catch this thing about military training? Is it easy for human beings to kill each other? No, it's really hard for human beings to kill one another. There was all these studies that happened, shortly after World War II that were done by the military that showed that, like, a good chunk of the time when people were fighting in armed engagements, they were purposely missing one another. Right? So basically, like, the idea is that, like, it's really hard to get somebody to cross that gap, right? And even if they've done it before, right, it really takes its toll on people to kill one another. Or it's something to be programmed towards being peaceful. Despite all the atrocities that happen throughout humanity, what makes atrocities possible is the dehumanization of people, right? And so it talks about after these studies come out, the military works on basically how do you get people to get rid of the sort of like gag reflex at shooting another human being. And does anybody catch how they do it? They do, yeah.
They did it by like having them train realistically, like shoot targets that look human, one of them was like they would stuff the target's head with like cabbage and ketchup or something. So when you shoot it, it exploded like a real head would.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it.
Yeah, so basically they start out with training you with things that are not very human, right? Anybody here ever target shoot? Anybody ever do this? I mentioned, I think in here before, I used to be a competition archer. You know, I used to target shoot a lot. You know, I also used to shoot rifle competitions. It's a great sport if you don't like to do things fast. It's the only sport where like, if you like, I love this in archery, if you pull back and you're like, I don't like that shot, and you reduce, everyone's like, good job being patient. So much better than like having to like run to a basketball hoop. Anyways. Point is like you start out with these targets, right? In the military, basic target that everybody who target shoots use. It's not a human face at all. It's a series of like round little like things that you get in and out of, right? And then they replace that, and they replace it with a target that looks like a human. And then they replace that with simulated video games where you're shooting the exact same device in the exact same way, but you're shooting people who move and walk around like humans. You shoot pieces of cabbage filled with ketchup so it explodes like PEDs. That's actually like, if you ever took hunter safety, they actually did that at the hunter safety in the state of Michigan. They would take a cabbage and set it in ketchup overnight, and then they'd shoot it with a shotgun and basically be like, be careful or that's going to be your friend's head. You know? But anyways, very opposite lesson than what they used in the military. But the point is and like there's a lot of talk about creating electronics, right? In which they could shoot and have like gore, very realistic, like as if they were shooting people, and whether that would help deprogram people. Now, so that's essentially that was to overcome this desire not to kill people in the military, which isn't. I'm not harassing the military, right? That's what the military does. Like the military has to kill people. I'm not being like overly idealistic, but the point is that what the author's interested in is if that gets realistic enough, can we back off from that threshold? And also, like they find that these trainings are actually really harmful for soldiers. Like the highest rates of PTSD have been in the Iraq War. Which isn't a particularly violent engagement, but because of basically this sort of guilt associated with that dehumanization, actually like is pervasively one of the things causing PTSD, right? According to our article. Okay, so scaling back, the idea is basically, right, that if we get realistic enough human faces and use them in a variety of ways that are dehumanizing, right, what will be the impact of that? So I was in Chicago 2 years ago, and there was a really great art exhibit. Has anyone ever seen the person, I think her name is Laura Simmons, I think is the name of the artist, who did like back in the 70s and 80s these things with miniatures. In particular, like she was the one who did all like the Barbie doll stuff. Have you ever seen this? And like sort of like a feminist deconstruction thing. Well, her most recent work has been they've made super realistic like sex robots and dolls that they sell in Asia, right? And she bought one of these, and then she just like dresses it up like a normal person and takes photos. And it's supposed to be like a little, like it's kind of like the uncanny thing. It's a little creepy and disturbing, right? But it's also supposed to make you disturbed at the fact that people order, right, these sort of human-faced animal-electronic things that they then engage in various acts with, right? Acts that they probably wouldn't engage in with real human beings. What's the danger of that? What's the danger in something like that? What do you think?
If they get used to doing those acts because they know they're not human beings, then they can start doing them to human beings with no, like, I guess, remorse.
Yeah. So in all these quiet little ways, it would undermine our humanity, right? It would undo that trick. and then it becomes easier. It reduces the threshold. Right? That's really what our author's saying. And this could be in really simple ways too. It's not like, it doesn't have to be as dramatic as like wholesale violence by people in the military, or you know, people taking on weird like sexual things with people. It could be things as simple as like, if you have a robot that you interact with that's like, I don't know, like does some service for you and you're rude to them all the time, it's gonna be a lot easier for you to be rude to somebody else, right? So basically like what our author's afraid is basically like saying like, rather than worrying about artificial intelligence, we should be worried about the way in which our own sometimes inhumanity towards one another will combine with things that basically become an excuse or make it easier for us to treat each other humanely. It's not the robots that are going to become dangerous to us, it's us, right? That's kind of the... So, okay. Any last questions before we round up for the week? Okay, great. Thank you guys very much. So next week we will talk about sociology of politics. Also, I'm going to start out our next class period. I'm going to talk a little bit, just in case people are curious. This isn't me being a salesman, so don't take it the wrong way. But I'm going to tell you about like what you can do with degrees in sociology and like what they might be good for, in case people are interested in doing something. Because you may be wondering, what kind of job do you get after sitting around talking about robot faces for a semester? You'll know the answer. So have a great day. Have a good weekend.